Whenever a person goes to Haiti for the first time, one of the first things that he or she inevitably notices are all the mission teams that are coming into that country from America. It's a really good thing, although some well-intentioned people have done bad things unintentionally. In essence, it's saying something good to me about kind of the soul of our nation, of our people, the willingness that those of us who live with such abundance have in giving of ourselves and our resources in tangible ways to people without not anything near as much as we have. And it says a lot good about humanity to me every time I see these groups. But that said, one of the first things you notice about all of these mission teams, and they mean you to notice it, are that all of them are wearing these over-the-top, very loud group T-shirts. You can't miss them. They don't want you to miss them. They come towards you in the airport, and the whole world all of a sudden turns neon. Everything's all of a sudden, glaring yellow or tangerine or lime green, something really subtle. Our mission teams have absolutely never worn such shirts. Very intentionally, we don't wear them. And that's as much as because we don't want to go over to that country and stand out any more than we already stand out. And certainly we don't want to go and kind of say through our attire, look at us, here we are, glowing brightly in your dark world. No, instead we go to share our lives with them, to be with them, and the existing differences that we already have from the people who live there we view as impediments to be overcome. They're not something to be displayed prominently in radioactively colored cotton. Well, one of these groups took the cake with their over-the-top T-shirts one year because theirs not only had the obligatory, church name and date of the trip on the back, but on the front, in really, really big letters, their T-shirt read, "Bringing Jesus to Haiti." Bringing Jesus to Haiti. And I just, knew immediately that none of these people had been to Haiti, and I would have loved to have seen their faces and the shock when they discovered that Jesus was already there. Before they showed up in their T-shirts, Jesus was there. And it's absurd in many accounts, not the least because Haiti is far more demonstrably and explicitly Christian than we are these days in the United States. But it's much more basic than that. Jesus is showing up anywhere in this world is not dependent on the likes of us. Thank God. It's a fundamental truth that they apparently did not get. Somewhere along the line, and this happens a lot, they convinced themselves that they were Sherpas for Jesus. They're loading Jesus up and sending Jesus out into a world that Jesus just couldn't get to without a little help from them. Now, I absolutely, as a Christian, the reason I've given my life to the profession that I have is my deep, abiding belief that the best thing that has ever happened in this world and for this world is that God came into this world in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. And one of the great opportunities not only of my life, but of the lives of all people is that we get to participate in God's coming into this world. And the way that we participate is by pointing towards it. Like John the Baptist does in this morning's gospel lesson, like Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, does in this morning's gospel lesson. They point it. If you've ever seen any iconography of John the Baptist, he's always pointing. We like to point like this. I've got a big game I'm going to watch today. Go Chiefs. And, at the end of every play, what do? They get up and in some way do something that basically says this, points here, me. We're usually not so audacious, but we mean it nonetheless. And yet John and Andrew understood that it wasn't about them. They were pointing towards something that was happening in their midst that was worth paying attention to, and they wanted others to participate in it, but they weren't the originators of it. And it was worth pointing to. And when I went to the place of John the Baptist's birth in the Holy Land, this wonderful leader of ours did this great thing that said that John really is the saint for all clergy, because clergy are those who point. And that's really what we do in our lives. And whenever congregations, or clergy for that matter, get confused about who's supposed to be pointed towards or who the saviors really are, everything goes awry. But you have to notice in their pointing that there was someone to point to. And it's not, again, because we invited Jesus here and he decided reluctantly to take an invitation, or that we were Sherpas for Jesus, or wore loud t-shirts so he wouldn't get lost on the way. Jesus Christ came by way of God's own design and desire and initiative. Jesus Christ came despite the fact that we would have never had a clue about how to get him to come in the first place, much less the audacity to dream up such a coming at all. Who would ever dream of such a story of God taking on the fragility and the vulnerability of our human skin and living a human life? But this is the first and most profound miracle, not only of Christmas, but of the entire Christian faith, that God came to us, loved us enough to come, and did so in a way that we would have never have dreamed of, by living our lives in our own skin. And so while there might be some religions out there somewhere that are in some way dependent upon human agency, for God to be riled up enough to act or to come, well, Christianity, my friends, is certainly not one of them. Christianity instead is a faith that says that our salvation comes to us by way of an unexpected intrusion into our established, settled world and lives. That is, our relationship with God is something that was God's idea way before it was ours. Now, we don't like this because we like to think everything in this world happens because of us. I guess that makes us kind of feel in control, which, if you look around, we're not. And what we are in control of doesn't go too well. So thank God our salvation isn't dependent upon it. But thinking that we're in control, I suppose that's the way that's why we talk about our faith so often like we do, oftentimes with the best of intentions, but still making it sound like it's all originating from us. I came to Christ. I gave my life to Christ, or we're bringing Jesus to Haiti. And as well-intentioned, again, as that is, what the Gospels are telling us is something that's really different from the way that goes of our coming, our searching, our giving, our bringing. Instead, they tell us of a God who comes to us, who walks into our lives unexpectedly, who lives his life in and amongst us, who gives up his life when all we're trying to do is perpetuate our own. And all of this happens very oftentimes despite us. As the Gospels speak of a God who's forever the initiator of human salvation, even as we generally are nestled down deep in our own status quo. And this is what makes that word gospel good news, which is what it means. That we get to participate in this story that we don't write, of which God is alone the author. And we participate solely because of God's invitation in Jesus to join in what he's already doing. Come and see, he says today. Come and see. You hear that, right? If Jesus did not invite, we wouldn't know to come. And if Jesus hadn't come, we wouldn't get the invite. In other words, if it were all just left up to us, none of this would have occurred, because the story of Jesus is a story of God's disruption of our settled affairs. It's not a story of our overcoming them. And thus today that invitation goes out even again. Come and see. And even today, for whatever reason you wandered in here today, habit, joy, despair, you still get to come and go to a place through invitation that you could never go on your own. And you could see what you could never see on your own. John started his gospel earlier in the same chapter by declaring that a light has shined in our darkness. In his great prologue, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his face, the face of the Father in a Son. A light shined in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. Beautiful words. And the second Sunday after the Feast of the Epiphany is always the day of light, focused on the light of Christ shining in our darkness. And it's appropriate because much of the Gospels start like this, not only John, but Matthew as well. I love Matthew saying, he says, the people who sat in darkness have seen a great light. But I also want you to notice the passivity in such statements about our position. We're sitting. We're waiting, at best hoping that the light comes, but it comes to us not because of us. We aren't the originators of the light. It comes, in fact, as an interruption of the darkness in which we sit. I don't know if you've ever sat in great darkness, been in your house at a weird time and weird place when the lights unexpectedly go off. It's not a very comfortable position to be in, is it? But in the stairwells of this church that don't have any windows, by the way, 4 and 5 stories tall. Somebody didn't know I was in there and just shut off the lights. There's not a whole lot right that can come of that. Thankfully, Steve Jobs saw it coming and put a flashlight on my phone. But what did they do 20 years ago in those stairwells? You had to wait for the light to come. I've talked about getting, a couple of times about getting stuck as a child in a cave, having to turn off our flashlights so we didn't waste them, and being enveloped by this darkness, being lost in darkness and owned by darkness. And the first sign of salvation, light. You knew that you couldn't give yourself. The light shines in the darkness, and the salvation that comes brings great rejoicing once that light shines. Isaiah today speaks of a God calling his servant, and while he is doing all of this great exposition of that call, he says this, you called me out when I was in my mother's womb. Now, I don't know how much you know about biology, but the word on the street is that babies in their mama's bellies, they don't have a whole lot of say in what happens to them. What is Isaiah trying to say to us? He's trying to proclaim that what God was up to in his life was God's work, and not something that was born of human agency, certainly something Isaiah provided for himself. It came into his life by way of intrusion. And so too the psalmist declares that all of his sacrifices and good works and efforts, they amounted to nothing. In fact, he found himself in the miry clay. It was only through the will of God that he bent low and grabbed a hold of him and put him on the solid rock to stand. We don't sing all the gospel songs I grew up with in the South as an evangelical. That was one of them. It brought me out of the miry clay. Todd knows the song. Put my feet on the rock to stay. You don't do it to yourself. By yourself, you're in the miry clay. It comes by way of intrusion. And so today, Jesus says the same in his calling of his disciples. After his dramatic baptism, Jesus is now going out to change the world as we never could. And I love that Jesus does it in a way that we never would, because he doesn't enlist the top talent agency to garner an A-list cast. He doesn't do extensive, public interviews to make sure that those he invites in are always going to poll real well. Doesn't give them a theology quiz or an IQ test or even see who can win a dance-off or anything like that. These disciples were not told that they're super talented or especially good-looking or at least have good hair so that they could do the weather report or something. All we know is that they were invited. And after they received that invitation, they were willing. Jesus simply walks into their lives and asks them in the lives that may be being lived for no reason in particular. He says, what are you looking for? And he's saying that today to you and to me. What are you looking for in your life? What are you looking for when you turn on the news? What are you looking for when you get up every day and go to work? What are you looking for at 3 a.m. when the darkness seems so real and all enveloping? And noticing that they were looking for more, the invitation they could never give themselves goes out. Come and see. And so they came. And in time, they did indeed see, and it didn't happen because they worked real hard all their lives to make it happen. It happened because of divine initiative and invitation. In other words, it came to them by way of grace, which is the only way that it could come when it comes to such a God. The light is shining in the darkness, my friends. The darkness does not have to be all that there ever is for us. But the question is, what are you looking for? Now, you can make your peace with the darkness. I mean, of course, there's some people who do that. There's another common reaction other than rejoicing that happens when a light shines in darkness. We've all done it. You squint. Light shines in darkness, you turn away. You shield your eyes from the light. You wish the light would go away because you think the light is the problem. I mean, you know what it's like when somebody shines a bright light right in your eyes when you're totally adjusted to the darkness. You want the light to go away. Darkness is normal. Darkness is right. Put that light in here. And it's only if you endure with the light that you come to see that it was the darkness that was actually the problem all along. That is, if you endure with the light that comes. The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light, a light that we could never give ourselves. Is there light shining in the darkness? Is that what we are looking for? If so, come and see something more. Our discipleship, our following of Jesus, our work in the world through this thing that is church, through our own efforts, through our lives, is not, thank God, dependent upon us. The salvation, the light of the world, is not emanating from the likes of us as though it could. We participate in the light. We become those who point those in darkness towards it. And we tell them, don't turn away. Don't shield your eyes from it. Adjust to it like you adjusted to the darkness. That is what we're called to do. Point. All to say, those t-shirts were wrong. We're not bringing Jesus anywhere. He's bringing us. And by the way, he was always here the entire time. What are you looking for? Come and see.